Welcome everybody at the seventh session of the National Forum on Glossy Black-Cockatoo Conservation, and welcome to all of you who've managed to make some time this evening to join us for an exciting session on citizen science. Firstly, start by acknowledging country. I'm on Yagara Turrbal country up in Western Brisbane, and I just pay respects to elders past, present and future on the countries that we're variously working on for Glossy Black-Cockatoo conservation and all the multitude of other things that we're all involved in. So I had this discussion with some of our panelists tonight who are involved in citizen science and Glossy Black-Cockatoo conservation, but a host of other things in their, I don't know, is that their spare time? Anyway, we've got five, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panelists tonight, and we'll get underway quickly. Bit about me, I'll be talking to you guys tomorrow about habitat mapping, but I've been involved in Glossy Black-Cockatoo conservation through the Conservancy for nearly 20 years now. Started as voluntary stuff when I returned to work with my second girl, so that's how I know where we're at. But Glossies are such a special creature, and it's been a privilege to be involved with them for as long as I have. I will stop talking now, but I will hand over to Brian Hawkins from the New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, the other DQ, as we call them. So Brian is a Senior Threatened Species Officer at New South Wales DQ, has spent much of the last 2 years trying to conserve Glossies in the New South Wales Mid North Coast, working with the Glossy Squad to increase awareness and understanding of these endlessly fascinating birds. And Brian is going to talk to us about how local area management planning help us understand where Glossies are breeding, where they're active nests, and how we basically are using citizen scientists to support that information. Over to you, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Sam, would you mind bringing up my presentation? Because I don't think it was working from my end. Thank you. And I might ding when it's time to change slides. I'm going to talk about the Biliirrgan branch of the Glossy Squad. I'm trying to show you my t-shirt. But first up, I need to thank Harry Hackett, who invented the Glossy Squad in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and Shane from Wales Design, who came up with the brilliant logo under Harry's guidance. Ding. Glossy Squad, Biliirrgan. Apologies for anyone who was at the earlier session where Lauren and I spoke about the LAMP process, because there is a little bit of overlap with this talk. So hopefully, if you've already heard this bit, it's not too boring. And if you're hearing it for the first time, it's also not too boring. Biliirrgan is the Gumbaynggirr word for Glossy Black-Cockatoo, and the work I'm talking about is happening on Gumbaynggirr, Yagle and Bundjalung country in northern New South Wales around Coffs Harbour, just south of Harry's Patch. The Biliirrgan project began with Commonwealth funding after the 2019-2020 Black Summer fires, and has the aim of securing the Glossy population in 4 local government areas: Nambucca, Biliirrgan, Coffs and Clarence. The first step in our process was to try and work out how many birds we had, how many Biliirrgans, but for various reasons, Glossies are impossible to count. Ding. So despite the great efforts of our partners at BirdLife with their great Glossy count, which is a terrific beginning, we still don't really have any idea how many Glossies we have in our Biliirrgan project area. So we decided that what we would do is try and map Biliirrgan habitat and then work backwards based on how much habitat we had, work out how many Biliirrgans we've got. Ding. And mapping the habitat was a enormous effort. The purple in this map, this is our project area. It's about 150 square kilometers. 1,500 square kilometers, 15,000 square kilometers. It's big anyway. And the purple is forest oak, Casuarina torullosa habitat. The green is Littoralis, black she oak habitat. The grey is the footprint of the Black Summer fires. So we mapped all this habitat, and then we had to work out, well, how does that equate to Glossies? How do you go from that area of habitat to numbers of Glossies? So the next step was to go out. Oh, sorry, I missed the slide. Anyway, the next step was to go out in the field and count she oaks. So we went out to 150 sites and counted Alocasuarina cones in the field, and then used some methodology developed by Matt Cameron, which has been shown to work in other parts of the species range to translate that mapped habitat and food availability into glossy numbers. And we came to the conclusion that we've got enough habitat to support more than twice the estimated national population of glossies. So although we don't know how many glossies we have, we're pretty sure it's nowhere near that many. So we thought, well, it looks like it's not habitat availability that's keeping the numbers low. So what else could it be? Could it be something to do with nesting? Could it be a lack of suitable nest hollows? Or could it be low breeding success, like was a problem on Kangaroo Island? So we thought we better go and see what's happening with nesting with glossies. But at that stage, there were no known active nests in our project area, and very few in New South Wales as a whole. So to fix this thing, we invited oh yeah, okay. That's the slide that shows you that we didn't know about any nests. So we'll go to the next slide, which is where we tried to fix this problem by inviting 3 of the top glossy nest finders in Australia. You can see one there, Mike Barth, and the others were Matt Cameron and Jaden Gunn. We had 60 local community members come to this theory session in Coffs Harbour, and then we then ran 5 consecutive practical sessions on the afternoons of the working week, Monday to Friday. We had 3 teams going out in 3 separate areas. And so we had hundreds and hundreds of person hours put into looking for glossy nests through this workshop. And at the end of that week, when we had 3 teams for 5 afternoons each, looking for glossy nests at 3 areas where we know there are lots of glossies. At the end of that week, we'd found a grand total of 0 glossy nests. But we kept going. What's the next slide? I'm curious about what it might be. Yeah, okay. So one marvelous thing that happened out of the workshop, the best thing that happened out of the workshop was that the formation of this Biliirrgan Glossy Squad. Like a lot of the people involved, they got so energized by looking for glossy nests that they just decided to keep going. And they kept going and they kept going, and they made WhatsApp groups. And some individuals in particular were really driven. And we still didn't find any nests. We didn't, week after week went by, we were seeing between 10 and 20 birds come in to our site at Urunga every day, and looked like they were going to breed and do the mating calls and everything. But we still couldn't find any nests until after 1 month after the workshop. 1 month after the workshop, we finally found our first nest. This is the night that we found the nest. It came from a tip-off from a local resident who saw glossies flying over her house. She saw 2 birds flying the same way every evening, the same flight path, and then only 1 bird. And so we went out to her house and the birds didn't show up, but she had an idea of where they might be flying. So over the course of about a week, we eventually tracked that nest down. It was in a 50-meter tall tallow wood. It was miles and miles and miles away from anywhere, deep in the bush. It was right in the top of the tree, but yep, that's it. That's the nest hollow. Mike Barth eventually managed to climb 40 meters up the tallow wood and put a camera on it, but I might come to that a bit later. So over that first winter, we found 4 nests in total. That was in 2023. And then let's have a look at the next slide. Yeah, so we found 4 nests in total that first winter, and over the summer when the nests weren't being used, there's a photo of Mike climbing up a nest tree in Bundarban up in the mountains. And so while the nest wasn't used, Mike put a camera on that nest. And our intention is we're going to put cameras on as many nest hollows as we can. So far, we've found 9 nests in total. So 4 or 5 the first year and 4 the second year. And we're learning amazing things from the cameras that we do have up. So maybe next slide. So this is a tree that the glossy pair successfully fledged a chick from in 2023 at Dundaraban. I'll get to your question later, Adam. And it's giving us good information on some of the other species that use or at least investigate the same hollow. So there's a lace monitor, which is, they're quite rare, 900 meters above sea level. Lace monitors are quite rare. Next slide. There's a brush-tailed possum, potential predator from Kangaroo Island. Next slide. I think that's an Antechinus. He buzzes around up and down the tree a lot. Next slide. And there's a masked owl, maybe looking for the Antechinus. And then amazingly over the summer, so that you can see that's the 24th of January, a pair of glossies came and they started checking out that nest hollow. Incredibly, like that female there in the photo was not the female who nested there the previous winter. It's a different pair. So we may have like a timeshare situation going on. Maybe that means that nest hollows are a bit in short supply. I don't know. Next slide. And then sometime around Mike's birthday, I think Mike's pretty sure it was on his birthday. We think she laid an egg in the hollow, and then ding, on the 31st of March, this happened. She left the hollow for a few hours, which she hadn't really done much up till then. There's a couple of reasons why we think the egg might have hatched. So 357, goanna, very, very rare. Goanna at that altitude goes up the tree. And then next slide, 7 minutes later, it comes out and pokes out its tongue. Presumably, it's just eaten the egg or chick. Ding. The glossy, the female, the flossy, she returned later that day. She spent most of the night or much of the night in the threat posture like that. She's clearly distressed. And after she flew away the next morning and she hasn't been back to the nest site since. So that's a bit of a grim outcome. But the good news is that out of the 9 nest trees we've been monitoring, we think there's been only 2 nests that failed. The other 7 we think have fledged. We just haven't managed to get cameras on them, but we're hoping to next year. So it's early days, and there are plenty of caveats around any interpretation of the data. But at this stage, there's no strong evidence that nest predation is artificially high. One other thing we've learned is that in our part of the world, it looks like the pairs that nest successfully one year don't attempt to nest the following year because the chick is still with them. So, and Mike referred to this phenomenon earlier. It looks like in our part of the world, unlike on Kangaroo Island, for example, where a lot of our knowledge of the birds comes from, it looks like the maximum reproductive rate is 1 chick every 2 years per pair. So what, Liz, were you giving me the hurry up? Hey, how much time have I got? None?
No,
okay.
You're out, Brian.
Okay.
If you can wrap it up.
Okay. Maybe just go to the next slide.
Oh.
Just quickly point out, thank the Glossy Squad and point out that in this sort of citizen science project, you need people to fill 3 kinds of roles. One is the initiator, instigator, leader type role that people like Mike and Victor. Second, like hardcore Glossy Squad volunteers like Loanna and Nat there, who will come out and trudge through the bush at night looking for nests. Third, you have this like enormous blanket of a sympathetic conservation community who love glossies and care about them and give you the really crucial information that will help you reach your goals and conserve glossies. And without the support of that broader community, I don't think our Glossy Squad would have found even a single nest. Thanks, that'll do.
Thanks so much for that, Brian. I'm sorry to rush you at the end there.
Sorry for going over time.
No, great presentation. We've got a few questions in the chat, but we might just wait till the end of the session and see how we're going for time on those ones. Our next speaker is Harry Hackett. We've just mentioned heard Harry's name mentioned a couple of times in there. Harry's is currently secretary of the Glossy Black Conservancy, and also does a lot of volunteer and landholder driven habitat protection and restoration activities in the Brunswick Valley catchment. formerly with Wild Brisbane Wildlife Habitats, Glossy's Northern Rivers project manager, and has her eyes and ears in the trees with the Glossy Squad. Lovely to have you with us, Harry, to talk to us about Glossy's Northern Rivers and the partnership that you've been involved in there. Over to you.
Hi, Liz. Thank you. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Brian. Great presentation. I'm speaking to you from Biliirrgan country in Northern Rivers, New South Wales. And I'd like to pay my respects to Biliirrgan elders past, present and emerging. Yeah, Glossy Squad. Glossy Squad was born out of the Glossy's Northern Rivers project that I was involved in 2022 and 2023. It was a project funded, led by Wild B&B, Wildlife Habitat. Some of you might have caught Dave's presentation earlier today on artificial nest hollows. The project was funded through WWF Australia and New South Wales Saving Our Species. And I've been thinking a bit about this, the question that was prompted to us, what makes a great citizen science project? I think it's four things, if I can distill it down. 1, education. 2, empowerment. 3, connection and relationships. And then the fourth thing is a massive amount of time and investment to pull all of that together. So when the project started in 2022, we were working Northern Rivers, New South Wales. There's 6 LGAs from the Tweed Shire on the border of Queensland down to the southern part of the Richmond Valley and out west to Kyogle. So massive range, and we knew that we needed help if we were going to set out to deliver the project's ambitions. Ultimately, the first thing we wanted to do was find the birds. We had historical sightings data to go from, so we did a lot of desktop research, but birds weren't being seen in a lot of those locations for some time, and then especially the impact of the 2019 and 2020 bushfires up here, masses of glossy habitat was burnt. So our number one rationale for setting out for the team was finding where the birds were currently being observed in the habitat that was available to them. So that's where Glossy Squad came as a concept. We basically wanted to engage citizen scientists to help us to be eyes and ears, Northern Rivers, New South Wales, on glossies. And the concept, we wanted it to be a call to action. So that's why we formed a squadron. We wanted it to be something that people actually want to be a part of and can get as much out of what they put in, and also meet like-minded people and a bunch of other bird nerds. And the role that citizen science plays in modern conservation projects, it cannot be underestimated, because without the intel that came in from people, we wouldn't have arrived at project sites to then drill down deeper and map bird sightings, as well as mapping feed trees. So the first thing we wanted to make it, a thing for people to be part of. We started the logo. We created a little, I'm not going to be able to see that very well, a little flyer that we pumped out everywhere, which basically took people to a landing page where they could brush up on their species ID, because as soon as you talk about glossies, people are like, oh yeah, saw 50 of them flying over, blah, blah. So it's so much love for Black-Cockatoos, but a lot of people didn't, when we started, know the difference between a yellow-tailed Black-Cockatoo and a glossy Black-Cockatoo. And in fact, lots of people had never ever seen a glossy before. So the education and empowerment components were really important. So, we get people to, we did the call out, heaps of people got in contact. It was incredible. So I basically sat there and logged everything in a spreadsheet, where people's area was, their extent of knowledge of the birds, refer them to more resources if they were interested, have a live conversation and kind of start building relationships. We ended up, there's like just under 200 people that have engaged with us through Glossy's Northern Rivers. So, and also the fact that glossies are a landscape species, we had to be looking landscape scale. And yeah, that was the beginning. I've been very privileged. I'm a citizen scientist myself. I'm not a trained ecologist. I've been a bird nerd since I was, that high. But I hadn't seen a glossy until 2020. Anyway, I'm been very privileged to learn from some of the best. And I think through this citizen science engagement and through the project work itself, the thing that stands out to me above everything else is just generosity. People like Mike Barth, Daniela Tiexera, Marama Hawkins from the Conservancy as well. A whole stack of people have just shared knowledge. So I've taken it on to basically regurgitate that knowledge to as many and spread it far and wide to as many people as possible. And the response, my God, it makes me cry sometimes. That's because I'm a big old softie. But what inspired me is that people really do care. And we've been able to engage in like real relationships. I have people that text me like 7 days a week, hey, with an update or something that's just gone on. We've had people who've grown up in Northern Rivers and grew up with glossies in large numbers and have noticed the decline in numbers over that time. The fact that the birds have been so hard to find has also been of great concern in our region. I think glossies are in significant decline. I can talk a tiny bit about that later. But one of the biggest things we've had to do as well, and this is where the time and investment comes in, is verification of what people are recording. You don't want to be a doubter, but you do need to follow up with some questions to really confirm that people are seeing glossies and that they understand glossy ecology and behaviour. But really, Glossy Squad Intel directed the project team over the course of 2022 and 2023. We were out from January 2022 looking for the birds. We didn't find a single glossy until May the 4th. May the 4th be with you is what we were pleased with. But then through Glossy, we were getting sightings intel. We would send the project out to verify and map like feed trees that were being identified or map locations that birds were being sighted in. What was my point there? I just went off track. Oh, we found a woman who'd been documenting glossy black-cockatoos on the Tweed Coast since 2012. And she had just made up her own database of images. And it was just, my God, you're an incredible woman. So Rayma Sargent was her name, and she works with the Tweed Wildlife Carers, just a legend. So and this was also through Mike's connection, generosity of Lauren Hook down with Glossies in the Mist, and the fabulous Erna, who've been developing the Flossie ID methodology of identifying individual birds, because we're like, how many birds do we have? We just got no idea. They're all just guesses. So a lot of information sharing. So again, I come back to, it's just been generosity all round that's enabled the work. What is the work? All of that intel helped tell us that we didn't know before, because we really didn't know very much before. We had no idea of a single glossy nest within Northern Rivers, New South Wales. In August 2022, through persistent contact from one Glossy Squad member, and we got out there, we found a nest, and it was 200 metres from her house.
You got 2 minutes, Harry.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Liz. So that was mind-blowing, and because we found that nest, we were able to basically, and we found that nest very early. That little one was possibly an egg. When we discovered it, we set up a lot of monitoring technology, and we observed that little bird, Firefly, until she fledged in late October. Having the knowledge of where a nest is gave us an incredible amount of information. We observed that nest was not used in 2023. However, it was used in 2024. So that then supports, in our region, glossies look like they're breeding every second year. It was the same pair, and I'm very happy to report that in 2024, Epic was the little one that fledged. So that's two more glossy fledglings in the world that we know of. We also were able to locate, through Glossy Squad support and a lot of hours on the ground, we found another nest in Brunswick Heads. So we now know of 3 active nests over the course of the last few years, plus 2 previously known nest sites that are no longer standing. It just means we can drill down and study a lot more. So the project team, 507 feed trees mapped. We've had 201 bird sightings. Some of those will be the same birds, repeat sightings, but through the female image bank that we've collecting and trying to ID individual females and where they're popping up in the landscape, we think that at the moment, like current estimate, there's less than 100 glossies in Northern Rivers, New South Wales. That's at least a starting point to then hopefully be proved wrong. But it was also really important to connect up with Brian's project because his northern project border is Clarence, which borders Richmond Valley. So we were able to connect up landscape scale from Tweed down to Coffs and share information and help support each other with citizen science outcomes. So thank you, Glossy Squad. You've just been the best. We do get all military when we're out in the field. It's just been a lot of fun, and the value of citizen science cannot be underestimated. So thanks, everyone.
Wonderful, Harry. I'm just amazing to have that many people engaged in gathering that data. I just wonder, you know, we don't put enough money into it. We're so reliant on dedicated volunteers and for people who get paid to do over and above to make this stuff happening on our threatened species. So fabulous. Thank you so much for your work. We'll again have to hold questions to the end. I'd like to now introduce Larissa Dann. Larissa has been involved in citizen science after a friend encouraged her to submit photos to Nature Mapper, and she's now posted over 5,000 sightings over 5 years. So Larissa is citizen science in action, and she's going to talk to us today about how she uses Nature Mapper to document glossies and no doubt other species. So I'll hand over to you, Larissa.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share now my slides.
Sam's back, so if we need help, she's there.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for that introduction. I am a citizen scientist and I'm from Canberra, and I just want to talk quickly about how I became involved. And it was just through word of mouth, with a friend encouraging me to submit my occasional nature photo to Nature Mapper, which we've been talking about throughout the day. And after a slow start, I became hooked, and I've now posted around 5,000 sightings over 5 years on the platform, but they're not glossy black, 5,000 glossy black sightings. Personally, I love the Nature Mapper platform. It's available Australia-wide, and it's Australian-owned, and partisanly, it's designed in Canberra. The data is stored in Australia, and expert moderators verify each sighting. There's a strong community of loyal contributors, and I think we feel quite connected, and there are many opportunities to contribute to various data collection and research projects, and there's a quarterly newsletter. So through Nature Mapper, in Canberra, one of the projects that I'm fortunate to participate in is an ongoing gang research project. And we closely observe and record hollow seeking and nesting behaviour before, during and after breeding season. Our small group consists of a few dedicated citizen scientists and amazing, committed and actual scientists, including Dr. Michael Mulvaney. Now, I am also fortunate to have access to a small block of land, 12 hectares on the far south coast. To the layman's eyes, and to mine for a couple of decades, this block looked infertile, boring, scrubby and monocultural, with the monoculture consisting of a thick covering of Allocasuarina littoralis, interspersed by a few sizable blackbutts and bloodwoods. And then I began my acquaintance with Nature Map, and my eyes opened. I discovered that the street and the broader area in which this block was situated was actually quite biodiverse, and most excitingly home to a population of around 15 or so glossy black-cockatoos. So now I was fortunate to have access to 2 of Australia's endangered cockatoos, almost literally in our own backyards. So what I'd like to talk about is how observing one species informed knowledge on the other species, or my knowledge anyway. So the first one is around nesting behaviour. So in 2022, when I was at the coast, I noticed some strange cries. I didn't recognize them by glossy blacks, but naturally I followed the source. And the noise turned out to be a female loudly begging in between consuming Alocasuarina cones. The hours of monitoring gangs then helped me recognize that this is possible glossy black-cockatoo nesting behavior and to look for potential hollows. And you can imagine that I was impossibly excited to discover not one, but two glossy black-cockatoo nesting hollows close together on the 112-hectare block. Through Canberra scientists in the gang studies, I engaged with an ecologist at the coast, Craig Dunn from Forestry Corporation New South Wales, and he provided a sound recorder for each of the two trees. Sadly, neither of the hollows produced a fledgling. Craig hypothesized that one of the hollows failed because of anthropogenic factors. So there was he heard constant trail bike usage past the tree during the school holidays, which was maybe halfway through the nesting of the live chicks. We did not know what happened to the second hollow, but it failed early. The female just disappeared, leaving a lone male who is still around today. Recently, however, while observing the second hollow with arborists, they were preparing to measure the hollow dimensions after being trained from the Canberra gang scientists. We witnessed a lace monitor languidly stretch as it warmed itself in the sun before moving into the hollow to gaze down at us. The climbers estimated the hollow and the monitor were up about 40 metres. So the mystery was solved, and unsurprisingly, the hollow remains unmeasured. The next aspect that I'd like to talk about is identifying female head feathering. So while female glossy black-cockatoos are recognised for their yellow identifying head colouring, gang female head colouring was perceived as uniformly grey, with some developing a few red feathers as they aged or the occasional presence of colour. However, after I started to recognise female glossy black-cockatoos because of their head patterning, I began to look more closely at my photos of female gang gangs. And to my surprise, I found that some female gang gangs also had a unique head patterning that persisted across seasons, allowing individual birds to be identified. So this here is Cheeky Rose, and you can see a rose-coloured feather on her cheek. According to Michael Mulvaney, this was a previously unknown aspect of gang feathering. Identifying individual female gangs allowed us to recognise whether the same pair was returning to a nest hollow. As a result, other citizen gang observers and I noticed that gang pairs return to the same vicinity in the breeding season, but may not necessarily breed each year or utilise the same hollow, although this season is looking a bit different. Our observations indicated that not using the hollow might be because there might be predation by possums or gliders, or at least the presence of them. The hollows might be lost because a tree branch fell, or there might be water in the hollow. They've also found that foraging, when raising chicks, gangs could forage within 2 kilometres of a nest, but it can occur up to 4 kilometres away, from Michael Mulvaney says. The next aspect that I'd like to share between the two is fledgling feet cleaning. So with the observing gangs, one of our small group of scientists, Tom Tyrrell, noticed that when young birds are about to fledge, they spend time on the lip of the hollow cleaning their feet. Tom postulated that feet cleaning was a sign that the young bird would leave the nest within days. And this observation was replicated so often, it's now acknowledged as a sign of imminent fledging. Newly fledged birds were then observed cleaning their feet in trees not too distant from the hollow from which they'd fledged, maybe for a couple of days after fledging. And we've theorised they clean their feet to roughen them up to help them perch or to feed, or to clear away if there might be a thin membrane covering the chick's feet. Then in mid-September 2022, I briefly visited the coast place. Early one morning, I saw glossy black cockatoos gliding back and forth low, weaving in and out of the casuarina and bloodwoods and calling loud and different from their usual morning mournful cry. Following the noise, I found 3 glossy black cockatoos in a eucalypt preening and chatting in the sun. And suddenly I realised that one was very young, and it was my first ever sighting of a fledgling glossy black cockatoo, covered in spots, spreading its wings as it wobbly tried balancing and cheekily chewing bark. As I watched and photographed, I noticed that the young bird was spending much of its time cleaning its feet. So based on our gang observations, I believe this was an indication that I was witnessing a newly fledged bird, perhaps just fledged that morning. So many questions. The more I know I don't know, especially after today. And there's so much that is known that I don't know. I'm not a researcher or an ornithologist, just a person developing an interest, and I'm learning to observe. And as a result, I have many questions with which I continually pester researchers. For example, here's one thing I've noticed about the glossy black cockatoos and gangs. I've never seen either species bathe in water. I've watched them come in to drink. I've never seen a glossy drink while perched. Each species warily dips and sips, then dips and sips for a few short drinks, then flies off. No hanging around for a fluttery bath. So I'm wondering, is this a thing, and why?
You got 2 minutes, Larissa.
Thank you. I'm just about finished. This won't be news to anyone, but I am continually astounded by the hours, and it's been discussed previously, that citizen scientists voluntarily spend observing. Hours spent, sometimes daily, during nesting, monitoring nesting hollows, recognising calls and what they might mean, watching feeding, preening, drinking, trying to interpret meaning, copious notes taking, writing up to share with our group, but it's worth it. This time is an investment in knowledge for the future of our vulnerable birds. That's it.
Oh, wonderful, Larissa. So much new information you've discovered just by being out there and being observant, and importantly, as in citizen science, just writing it down, documenting it, and sharing it with the world. That's just absolutely amazing, fantastic, and thank you so much for your efforts in that space. We'll keep questions to the end, and I think, Adam, I was supposed to get you in a couple of talks ago, but are you ready to go now?
Yeah, I'm ready to go now.
Lovely, over to you. Oh, well, sorry, I should introduce you first. That was my bad. Sorry about that. Adam works for New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, leading a team to implement threatened species, water and pest and weed management across national parks in northwest New South Wales. So his work over the last 10 years has involved implementing conservation projects under the New South Wales Saving Our Species program. Can we have that in Queensland, please? Including a project on glossy black-cockatoos with Central West Local Land Services. And Adam's going to talk about making the inland glossy great again. Now I can hand over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that invite. And you can see my screen. I'll just check.
Sure can.
Awesome, great. Yes, thanks for that invite, introduction, and g'day everybody. I'm going to talk about the MIGA project, or Making the Inland Glossy Great Again, taking you well to inland New South Wales. And this project is undertaken on the lands of the Wiradjuri and the Gamilaroi people. So the Making the Inland Glossy Great Again project was funded via the contestable grants process from the New South Wales Environmental Trust and the New South Wales Saving Our Species program. It includes 6 broad aims. These are mapping of foraging habitats, monitoring artificial nest hollows, some protocols for hazard reduction activities across the sites, landholder engagement for habitat restoration, community education and population monitoring. The project is coordinated by the Central West Local Land Services in collaboration and partnership with the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, Dubbo Field Naturalists and Conservation Society, Forestry Corporation of New South Wales and the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. So Central Western New South Wales, it's a fairly big area. What we've got here, this map gives you a bit of an idea. You've got New South Wales up there, which you can see the sort of that great big oval that I've identified the site with. From Narrabri to Parkes, so north to south, it's about 360 kilometres as the Glossy flies. So it's a pretty big area with 3 sites spread within that. So the first site in the north is the Biliirrgan Forest, which includes both National Park and State Forest Estate, just south of Narrabri, which is there. And this site had a successful community count undertaken in 2014-15. And the result of that meant that we had some information on the population numbers and methodologies and all of that stuff, which was great. The second site in the middle is Garnered National Park and the surrounding private tenures and bits of state forest and other Crown lands. And this site has had the WA Field Nats undertaking biannual surveys since 1995. So we had a lot of information about this one and population numbers and fluctuations and all of that stuff, which was also great. And then we've got Biliirrgan National Park in the far south near Parkes, which is about there. And this one was our clean skin. So this one, while we knew there were glossies there and there was habitat there, we had no information on population size. We didn't know where they hung out. We had no information about where they went for water and all of those things. And basically we were starting from scratch. So this one was, we knew, going to be a slight challenge, but we were prepared to tackle it without any issues. All 3 of these sites are generally isolated or difficult to access, particularly in poor weather, but they do all have a major population centre within about an hour, which is handy. To undertake the 6 of those broad aims that we had, the population monitoring, we instigated the Great Inland Glossy Count. So this project the count aims to survey all 3 of those sites across that area at approximately the same time. However, given the logistics of trying to get from Narrabri to Parkes on one weekend and do all of those surveys within those 3 sites, we couldn't do each of those 3 sites in the same weekend. We had to do it concurrently across 3 concurrent weekends to make it work. We just didn't have the resources to be able to do it in one weekend. And this does hence mean that there's a chance of double counting, but hopefully we've reduced that as much as possible. The count is centred on the large areas of Crown lands within each of those 3 sites, but it's not restricted to that. So the private property has been involved every year, and so have other tenures, which has been fantastic. It's a water point survey-based methodology, and this is basically means going in, surveying from the water points, taking advantage of that really social nature the glossies have of coming down to drink together, particularly late in the evening before they pop off to go and roost for the night. So it meant that rather than have to survey these really large areas of the landscape and try and find the glossies, it really brought us back to a smaller number of sites to work with. And this was the methodology that had been used both in Garnered and Biliirrgan previously. But to do this, we had to have a fair bit of volunteer engagement. We needed a lot of volunteers to help. So the count has been run annually since 2019, and we've had a massive contribution from volunteers, our citizen scientists, for this, with over 457 involved over the last 6 years, and that equates to more than 2,000 hours of their time. I say more than 457 because there was probably a number of people we missed in adding it all up. It's been one of those fun things to keep track of. They've come from all over the state. They've come from the ACT. They've come from Queensland, which has been fantastic as well. And it was all managed through the National Parks Volunteer Information Portal. And we've recorded glossies at those sites every year, which is each of the 3 sites every year, which has been great. And the last count was actually finished this weekend, just gone in Biliirrgan. So the results are hot off the press, as it were. So in terms of results, these 3 graphs give you the data for the last 6 years for all 3 of those sites. I'm going to skip ahead to Biliirrgan and talk about it briefly for a sec. As I said before, Biliirrgan,
5 minutes.
Biliirrgan was our clean skin, where we had no information. So we did what we'd been doing successfully in Garnered and the Biliirrgan, and threw a whole heap of volunteers at the landscape at water points where we could find them, and to try and replicate that, and we failed. We had very little success in comparison, and we struggled to have any idea of where those glossies were and what they were doing. And that continued the following year and the year after that as we tried and tried again. And then in 23-24, we pivoted the whole part of doing Biliirrgan to do a more broad landscape search for glossies during the day, and we hit gold with 47 animals, which was great. So goobang has had to be changed in terms of its methodology and approach. Going back to the Biliirrgan and Gnu, we had some really good numbers with glossy, particularly in that first year, which equates to the end of that last hideous drought that we had. The total population that we got was over 780 odd animals or something like that. It was a really big number across the two sites. After that, the population's gone up and down, it's gone down, and then sort of bounced around. And that's, you know, with the La Nina coming in, there's been a lot of freestanding water. So I did take a little bit of a look at that in terms of those total glossy numbers, adding the two sites together to see what that actually did, looking at rainfall for the spring-summer period, which is when we do our surveys. And this graph here gives you a bit of an idea what we're looking at in terms of where we have low rainfall, so that's 2019-20, we're getting really high numbers of glossies. And as the rainfall is increasing over the year, so therefore a lot of freestanding water, we're getting a lower number of glossies. So the data is sort of indicating that what we were suspecting was going on is happening, and they're probably dispersing more within the landscape. So that's one of the outcomes that we've got from this project, which has been great. The project hasn't been without its issues and challenges. So I've talked about goobang as one of those major challenges that we've had. We've also had a couple of fires in Gnu across the course of the project. We also had the couple of fires in the Biliirrgan last year, including the Duck Creek fire on the screen, which was pretty hideous, and it burnt through a large part of the park and the state forest. This is Delwood Dam, which we surveyed every year and got glossies at every year, and that's the aftermath of that fire. And this year there were no glossies around that; they've moved on. It is also a tricky landscape and terrain to work in, and then there was COVID, which actually didn't stop us, but the hassles that it brought in terms of deploying a lot of volunteers into the bush and meeting with them and making sure that they were safe raised its head. So we came up with this approach of doing a dispersed deployment where we do maps like this. This is for Delwood Dam, which you just saw on the screen, which gives all this information about how to get to these sites, how to get back out. They've got to check in, they've got to check out and do all of that. And that has worked really, really well. And after COVID finished,
2 minutes,
kept going.
Adam. 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to run a little bit over. There was also a lot of flooding and all the damage to the roads. And then we had a massive storm in 2023 that came out of the blue that caused people to get stuck. And can't go on without saying that our volunteers were amazing, occasionally are challenging, but it was always rewarding working with them. The project wasn't just about the count though. We've done a lot of other things, workshops with the community for education, handing out tube stock, nest box management in Gnu, and media. Great for glossy habitat. There was the foraging habitat mapping as well that we've done across the landscape, and also started looking at using audio recorders across the landscape to try and improve our methodologies. This is in its infancy. The other thing we've done a fair bit of is landholder engagement. So 9 project sites were funded to do a whole heap of enhancement and protection of glossy habitat. Those 9 landholders have all committed to 10 years of pest control to protect those sites. 6 of them are also doing weed control, which is fantastic. And 8 of those sites all up are being monitored by the local land services ongoing. And this is my last slide. So where to next? This year was actually our last year of funding from the contestable grants. So we're looking at winding it up. And that includes reviewing and completing the outstanding commitments, which we've just about done. And we're looking to pivot to the local area management program approach, which was talked about earlier today for these projects into the future. It's still something we're working towards at the moment. So that means the Great Inland Glossy Count should be back again next year. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam. I think to me, what that talk really clearly identifies is you need long-term investment and resourcing, and a combination of good technical resourcing and coordination with volunteer effort to really make things happen and to learn and really what's understand. 1 year, it doesn't give you enough information. It's that longer term trends that we really need to keep on with, and that requires dedication. Thank you.
The project team working together as well to actually encourage and enhance and do all of that work and get those volunteers has been absolutely critical to
absolutely fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to have that many and for the repeat monitoring, they're obviously enjoying it and getting a lot out of it. So that's on you guys for your good coordination. All right, last but by no means least, we have Victor Ostrowsky. I hope I pronounced that right, Victor. Victor is a French Australian. Do we need to say how old you are? I don't know. I've got that details. Does anyone want to know how old Victor is? I can put it in the chat. You can take bids on it. Guess anybody? He's moved from France to Turkey 17 years ago and has fell in love with our country, the land, the wildlife, and sounds and colours. He's got a certificate in conservation ecosystem management and is in works, I think, from the Clarence Valley. Victor is going to talk to us about the Glossy Squad, Clarence Valley, which he recently co-established, and explain how he got involved and what motivated the group to form. I'll hand over to you, Victor. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone. Hi. Thank you to the Conservancy for having me and for the important work that you do ongoing, and to all our panelists and everyone involved. It's such a inspiring group of people. As I often say, you guys are the superheroes, and I am here to help you guys out. So I'm speaking from unceded Yagal country, and I pay my respects to Yagal people past and present and emerging. I am a founding director of Wildlife Preservation Clarence Valley and a member of the Glossy Squad Clarence Valley, which is our local branch, established this year by Daniel McCauley and myself in conjunction with the original Glossy Squad, Saving Our Species team, Clarence Land Care, the Clarence Environment Centre as well, to essentially centralise our efforts and build awareness and momentum in the valley for glossy conservation. So we assist the Saving Our Species team with data collection, field surveys, and implementation of habitat augmentation programs. We've recently finished a project in which we propagated known feed trees that we grew in the nursery, and we ended up planting / distributing just under 3,000 trees, expanding known glossy habitat on both private properties and Crown lands. We also supplied some of those trees to TAFE classes undertaking bush regeneration activities, and spoke to them about Glossy Black-Cockatoo identification and ecology. Daniel, on his end, has been working with Clarence Land Care in partnership with the Great Eastern Ranges in Nimboida, where glossy sightings have critically reduced after intense and repetitive fires. So that project included regeneration of lost habitats, improving accessibility to feed trees through weed control, reducing fuel loads around remaining hollow-bearing trees in active glossy sites, and installing artificial nesting in a strategic location that the birds are known to favour, near a permanent water source. Since the beginning of that project, sightings have notably increased in the area, and the amount of birds as well, from 3 to 7, which is a great outcome to see the birds returning and staying. And through these projects, we've engaged many stakeholders, and we've been able to bring some light to the plight of glossies in our valley, which we look forward to continuing. Another project I'm involved with is the Glossy Black-Cockatoo corridor acquisition in Garnered near Yamba, undertaken by Wildlife Preservation Clarence Valley. And the story with that essentially is the property came on our radar when I noticed glossies flocking up in this area over the course of a couple of months. We went from about 2 birds to 11, and they stayed in a very limited area for many months, right through the nesting season. And through mapping out the feeding habitat in the area, I became aware that a 6-acre corridor was about to be cleared for an imminent subdivision in 2007, so a legacy development like plagues much of the East Coast. I was able to document 30 feed trees on that 6-acre property, many old-growth bearing trees, several other threatened species as well, such as rufous betongs, coastal emus, which are part of a critically endangered population here of less than 50 adults, powerful owls, barking owls, to name a few, and all in all, just a bit over 65 species of fauna and 75 species of flora. So I approached the owner of the property, who it turns out is in a wheelchair and is subdividing to remain financially stable. So through constructive discussions and compromise, we agreed to an alternative scenario, a win-win, which would see the property be bought over for conservation. So I gathered some like-minded conservationists, and we looked at several options and ways to go about it, and decided to establish Wildlife Preservation Clarence Valley, with the invaluable mentorship and guidance of our partners Biodiversity Legacy and their legal team. WPCV, Wildlife Preservation Clarence Valley, is a non-profit community land trust set up as a company limited by guarantee. We, as I said, are working to purchase the property from the owner and protecting it forever by placing it into a community ownership structure. So we've done a lot of work up to now, figuring out the ins and outs, negotiating a fair and achievable price and a way forward that is viable both for us and for the current owner. Again, through discussion and active listening, we were able to recently put our finger on a price of $850,000 for the full 6 acres. And we're currently waiting for our tax-deductible gift recipient status and working through a fundraising strategy to have one big go at pulling the necessary funds together to make this happen. So at this point, like I said, both parties are willing. Most of the work is done. The details, for the most part, are sorted out. And all that's stopping us from saving this wildlife corridor for good is the money. So we all know that one threat, the major threat to Glossies, is habitat loss. And here we have an actual tangible chance to save some habitat. So everyone involved, we're all really hoping to find the financial support in time to get a successful outcome to what is already a great story, but has the potential to be even greater. So if anybody's interested in the project, to find out more about our organization and the scope of work that we do, please visit our website, www.wpcv.org. You can find the news coverage of this project and hear from us further and from the property owner. You can also pledge to donate towards the acquisition by filling out a form. And you can subsequently find another talk I gave a few days ago in which I speak in a lot more depth about the project and about the importance of biosphere preservation as part of systemic risk mitigation and community resilience. So again, if you're interested, www.wpcv.org. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to be part of this inaugural forum, and I look forward to the rest of it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victor. It sounds like you've taken the citizen science into citizen action with the acquisition. Ambitious target, but 850 on the, you must find some, hopefully you find some wealthy donors. Sam's put that website into the chat, so all of you can go out there and just jump on board and just support what Victor's trying to achieve. So thank you all very much. I think we have time, Sam, don't we, for questions? We've got, I think, half an hour before you're going to kick us out of this Zoom room to make sure that we don't hold up the rest of the, no more presentations after tonight. I think you're all going to bed, aren't you? Because it is very late down south, as I've been reminded. Right, so we do have some questions in the chat. I'm just going to go back to the start where we had some of them coming. Oh, some really practical ones for you, Brian, from Adam. How on earth do you change the batteries and clear the cards in trees of those cameras when they're 40 meters up in the sky?
Well, the cameras are solar powered and they transmit images over the 4G network. But at some point, especially with it took a day and a half for Mike to climb the Kaleng tree. We initially had a half day go at it and it just wasn't doable. And then we came back a few months later and he had another go and he got up there. That camera stopped working. So I think we had like maybe a loose connection to the solar panel. So we'll have, at some point, someone, probably Mike, will have to go up and bring it down. I think that camera was actually the closest he could get was about 10 meters from the hollow and maybe a bit further. And I think it's actually too far away for the movement at the hollow to trigger the camera. So unless we can get some kind of special longer range focusing camera, I think we'll have to just continue monitoring that tree through audio, which in itself is a bit of a journey to retrieve and set out.
They love to throw us these challenges, our Glossies, don't they? Where they nest, if we can find them, what they eat, where they go to. They're just I guess that's why they're a threatened species, right? Because they're difficult. Anyway. We've got a couple of other great questions in the chat. One from Barbara here about what do the characteristics do the nest trees share?
That's a great question. They all share the published characteristics of nest trees, which is at least 8 meters above the ground, vertical or close to vertical, entrance diameter at least 15 centimeters, and inner stem at least 30 centimeters across. So they all share those characteristics. One thing that's quite interesting, some of them are in, apart from that, they're in all different types of trees. I think 3 of them are in stags, so dead trees. There's some in New England blackbutts. There's some in Sydney bluegum, coastal blackbutt. Tallowood is the Kalang one is the tallowood. So all different tree species. But interestingly, the ones that aren't on flat ground, so there's 2 or 3 that are on flats. The ones that are on sloping ground are all on south-facing, or more or less south-facing slopes, which could be related to thermal properties. I know that I think it was Kalia earlier said that on Kangaroo Island they avoid putting out nest boxes on north-facing because the birds don't like that. Or it could just be that there are more hollow-bearing trees on south-facing slopes because it's wetter and they're more protected from fire. But that, and as I mean, we haven't found that many trees yet, so that may turn out not to be a real pattern about the south-facing slope thing, but it might.
Just to add to
Yeah,
that, the 2 nests that we were able to come across, one was north-facing and one was west-facing.
There you go.
One in a stag and one in a living tree, just with a dropped limb. Both around similar heights, though, around 12 meters from the ground.
That's great. And I think that's where the value of citizen science is. So we can learn so much more about what the birds are doing and what they particularly like. It's always interesting to me to find that we go in sometimes to an area with an assumption that we know something about a species, and then go, actually, now that we've got people looking and observing and recording, it just blows some of those assumptions out of the water, and we go, oh, okay. But you're not here to listen to me, so let's look back at the questions we've got here. I've got one here for you. Oh, it's my question. Let's not go there. The feet cleaning thing, Larissa, you mentioned that. So was that just picked up based on just observations of what the birds were doing? And yeah, you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's got quite a bit of interest in the chat.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was another person he'd been looking at the gangs for a while, and he just noticed that they'd sit on top of the rim, they'd stretch their wings, and they'd clean their feet. And they would then generally fledge within 4 to 5 days within cleaning their feet. And it was really interesting because I've just finished watching or observing a galah hollow, and the particular fledgling that I was watching did exactly the same thing. As soon as it started cleaning its feet, the next day it fledged. And I've been watching it daily. So it's just through observation, and it's just been repeated so much that it's become a truism for us anyway.
Any thoughts on there about why? We might have Harry or any others on the panel here who got any thoughts of why are the birds doing that? Like, what's necessary about having clean? Normally you wipe your feet before you go into something, not when you're leaving. So any thoughts?
It'd be a great one to get Mike's brain across, given how many nests he has observed in both on KI, and I've never heard of that myself. In the 2 instances where we had eyes on a bird up until fledging, we didn't observe that behaviour, and like whether the team was there in person or observed on the camera. What we would advise a sign of fledging is the nestling will start practicing its flapping in the hollow, and we observed that a couple of times. But yeah, I think Mike would be a great one. Can we take that one on notice to throw past Mike for his input?
Yep, definitely.
I'll make a note.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be great. Thanks. What else questions we've got here? Oh, a couple of questions. Well, from me, I was writing them in the chat because I was making sure I didn't lose track of them when I was getting absorbed into the discussions and the presentations. I was just wondering, the Nature Mapper program, you said it's Australian owned. How does that compare to iNaturalist? A lot of people I know been here in Queensland use iNaturalist. I know iNaturalist feeds the Atlas of Living Australia. Does Nature Mapper do the same? And how do either of them, does it link to sort of the government referral processes as well? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, for me anyway, I've tried iNaturalist, but for me, Nature Mapper was easier to use.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed the community sense of it as well, and the moderation. But yeah, my understanding is, and you can ask Aaron tomorrow, who designed Nature Mapper. It goes to ALA, and a lot of other government. It's being used by government as well. That's my understanding.
Can I just jump in there? Before moving back to northern New South Wales, I was in ACT parks, and it's pretty much the Nature Mapper there is pretty much replaced their version of what in New South Wales is Bionet. It's just so fantastic, and it updates automatically overnight. And also I've used iNaturalist and Nature Mapper, and I find them both really good, but a lot depends on who the moderators are for particular groups. So in northern New South Wales, I tend to put plants into iNaturalist, and there seems to be a shortage of plant moderators who could confirm the identifications. But with Nature Mapper, like if I put those same plants into Nature Mapper, even though it's originally a Canberra-based product, they would get verified very quickly because they just seem to have a team of moderators who are really on the ball.
Oh, that sounds really good. I think the more this is where citizen science, I think, can really come to its fore. You've got so many talented people who really know their stuff and learning every day, like everybody is, what species are. But to get it into a system where that data can be used to inform decision making about land use is really, really important. We've got a couple of other questions here. There's one I think was for you again, Brian. The question is, were these trees in state forests? I'm just trying to, that was from Save Sunrise Glossies. I'm not quite sure how else it fits in. Is there more to that question? Maybe you can type it in if Save Sunrise Glossies can type that question about the trees asked earlier, a bit more detail, that would be great, and we'll come back to it. One for you, Adam, was have you mentioned about the birds moving between different sites and you weren't sure if they were the same birds at one point. Have you thought about, we've had great presentations on Glossy ID, about using that with your volunteers to work out whether you've got the same birds? And that fire photo you showed at the end, what are you guys doing to stop that happening again? Because no doubt when we see fire like that, you go, there go the nesting hollows, there go the food trees. That's 10, 15 years for more food, and that's hundreds of years for hollows in those landscapes. We've got to do things differently. Over to you.
Okay, so the Flossy ID question, no, we haven't looked at it. When Lauren came out last year or the year before, and she actually did Delwood Dam. We put her out there, which she got some glossy. She actually did some diagrams of the females and gave us those as part of it. There was a whole heap of data that I haven't included in my talk because it was focused on the citizen science component to it. We do ask all of our volunteers to try and identify males and females and juveniles from as part of the ID, but we also have moments where that is just completely not possible. So year number one in 2019, we put one of the guy who was actually coordinating from the Environmental Trust on one of our dams called Pesca Cocoboy, and I thought, safe one, it's not far off the road, he can't get lost, he'll get a couple of glossies, world is good. 200 or plus birds hit him and I think it was
Wow.
200 odd. It was massive. He started going through the data sheet's hilarious because he starts going through and putting males and females down, and then he reached this point of overload where he couldn't cope. And we've had that happen. I've had the same problem on the dam that I regularly go to, where I've had 80, 90 to 100 turn up, and you're flat out just trying to keep track of which flock's coming in where and all of that stuff at the same time. And that's not unusual. So last year it was my director for National Parks was out there, and he got 94 birds. So we do get big numbers. So this year, I'm just trying to think what the biggest count was, about 35. I think it was. So we do get big numbers coming in on sites, and that means it can be really hard to do that. If there was some tech that would actually do that for us, that would be fantastic. But it's typically difficult, and I've tried to take photos of them and get close enough to get good images of the birds to be able to do that. I've got some images which are great, but I don't have anything I can use for an ID with the flossies. So it's something that I'd like to work on, but at this stage, no. They're not. I don't think that. I think the counts we're close enough together and far enough apart logistically. I'm hopeful that there's not a lot of crossover with the birds moving. We haven't done any radio tracking. We haven't looked at that. It wasn't part of our project. We just didn't have the resources to do it. It's something that it would be really good to compare between the three sites to see what the Glossies are actually doing, but it's not something that we've looked at yet. In terms of that fire, so the Duck Creek fire was horrific. It was huge. It was crazy. It was damn awful. And it was a bit of a worry. It's been interesting from the perspective that we've got 5 years of data before it, and now we can start monitoring post to see what happens. So in a way, it gives us an opportunity to continue doing counts in there. And I made sure this year we put people right across that fire scar at all the different dams, including the one I went to, which I got nothing for the first year. But we did actually, what we did notice, and a lot of people have said to me it's a decline. I don't think it's a decline. I think it's a dispersal. So what we've seen is that at all of those sites that got burnt, no animals. And we've seen more animals in the central Biliirrgan and also to the north and to the west. And so they're heading into the West Biliirrgan, you get more into the bull oak, the casuarina lumini country. And I've had a number of reports this year of birds feeding on casuarina lumini. So what I think we've seen is that dispersion into areas with better habitat. And driving through there this year, there was a lot of habitat that you drive through, and yet definitely all the casuarinas are dead. And then you hit another patch, and it was really light burn, and they're actually still all alive. All the adult ones are still there. They're still carrying cones. And then you move through another patch, which is burnt out. So it's the fire that I put up some really nasty photos of the fire because it literally was pretty bad. They had the full-on pyroclastic pyrocumulus thing going on with creating its own weather systems and the whole thing. It was full on for management. And I deliberately put those nasty photos up because it was bad, and there's no sugarcoating that. But when you look at the broader landscape, it was not that bad everywhere. In terms of your direct question about what we're doing, as I said, it went right across state forest and national parks. So this is it's a very big land management question that we have to look at between land management agencies. And we're doing all we can. One of the parts of the project I didn't discuss was that we are looking for nest hollows as well, like everyone else. We did find one in the Biliirrgan. I think it got missed in the fire. I haven't had a chance to go back to that. But we have been doing work in that space as well to understand what's going on. So in terms of ongoing management, we're constantly trying to reduce that risk of a major bushfire. And sometimes, as we saw back in 2019-20, but also with that Duck Creek fire, the conditions just turn hideous, and it's not a lot we can do. But we're working to that. The habitat mapping that we've done, the intent with that is, and something we have to write up in the next 6 months, is to prepare a plan for and how we're going to manage fire to reduce that impact on the really good foraging habitat across that landscape. And for the Biliirrgan now, that's probably much more critical given the size of that fire scar. I didn't put a photo up of the fire scar. It was hard work. I had enough time trying to pull all that information together, let alone getting another picture of just how big an area that impacted. And it was already bad enough putting on those horrible images up from the RFS. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks for explaining that, Adam. And I think that's again coming back to the citizen science. That's where people and observations can help us build our knowledge and our data on habitats used, where the nests are, that can then lead to improvements in actually how we manage land. Back on the question of citizen science, Harry, there's one in for you in here. Sorry, get my words right. 200 volunteers, like the number of volunteers that you guys have been talking about generally, how do you keep people engaged? I know in my little patch of the world, there's no way I'm thinking Adam's seeing red-tailed black-cockatoos given the numbers he's just talking about. We don't see glossies like that. I've done so many birding days up here, glossy counts, where you just don't see. And the people I go out with go, are we ever going to see glossies? We've seen them once. And few birds, like 3 birds, nothing like these hundreds. So how do we keep people engaged when they're not seeing? We're talking about a threatened species that's highly mobile, moves around. Big impacts like fire and drought means they're dispersing. There's not losing predictability. And actually, are they dispersing or are we seeing decline? We'll come, we won't come back to that one. But Harry, what do we do about engaging people and keeping them engaged in helping us gather data on glossies?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Liz, because it's one of the biggest challenges. And to be honest, the project funding has expired, so my role is no longer funded. So I do what I do in keeping up with people just out of pure fact that I have a relationship with them and we're all glossy obsessed. I find you just need to get people obsessed, and that's motivation. It builds a community of people, because we've also spent a lot of time, like I can't remember how many workshops and events, like I'll rock up to the opening of an envelope to talk to people about glossies. We've done a lot of engagement stuff, and so there's been little breakaway groups. There's a bunch of bird photographers that have been super energized and on the case for trying to capture glossy profile headshots. So we've got over 500 images that we just have not had the time to go through and verify and identify. But it is a challenge. Lockie Cooper, who's been working with Glossy's Northern Rivers, he runs the Facebook page, and he's been an incredible, just constant connection for people. I don't use Facebook, so yeah, I said, no way, I'm not doing that. But Facebook has been a good, and for people to chat amongst themselves. But literally having someone at the end of a phone that will listen to someone rabbit on about the time that they went out that arvo and what they saw, whether they see, like heaps of times we don't see birds either. Like it's just a reality. The day that you do find a bird on your survey, it's, that's the rarity. And then so when people go, oh, there are birds there at the moment, people actually go and try and find them themselves. We haven't had glossies around here for ages. I can't think the last time I didn't see any on birding day, and the time before that would have been a couple of months before. So it's a long time between drinks here in Northern Rivers. But I have to say, like the Land Care Network up here has been so incredibly supportive, and you've just got to keep telling the story. So I'd love to be able to say, great, we could have funding for another 2 years and really ramp up next level, because I kind of feel like we're only just getting started. So to lose momentum is, that's a bit of that's a depressing concept, but it's a challenge for sure. So I just, wear my glossy hat wherever I am, and encourage people to just get out there and stay in contact. And I have developed some really awesome friendships with people that have been part of it. So it's been a two-way thing, on a few levels.
Thanks for that, Harry. Any other comments?
I might jump in there on that too. We've had a lot of repeat people come back as part of the counts. So people that start with us and they've been there the whole way through. And I've tapped into all the birding groups across New South Wales as well, which has mixed results. The local ones have been very keen, and the further you get away, the harder it is to engage with them, but that has certainly helped. But one of the benefits I've got, particularly with the Biliirrgan site, which is the one that of the three, I actually manage the Biliirrgan one and then pass it on to the next group down and then the next group down. One of my benefits is, I think I mentioned it, I've got 80 odd dams across the Biliirrgan, that's the state forest and the national park. We typically only get enough volunteers to do about 30 to 40 dams. So that means we can move people around. And every year, I typically, if someone's been at a dam last year and they didn't get anything, and we know from the records that we're getting that we don't often get animals there, I try and shift them every couple of years to somewhere where they're likely to get a glossy to keep the interest up. So I can move people around the landscape like a lunatic. I also have to account for their ability to get to those sites, because typically they need a four-wheel drive. So if they've only got a two-wheel drive, I've got a very limited pool to work with. But if I can move people to a site that's going to provide that opportunity and they haven't had a chance, I will. And that's part of trying to get that engagement and keep it alive year to year to year. And it has worked. So
I think that if once word gets out about you've got 90, hundreds of birds visiting your dams, you're just going to get flocks of people from northeast New South Wales and southeast Queensland coming to visit you, because it's also what an extraordinary site.
Hell yeah, we're coming. Like, oh my God, concept of 9 birds. The most birds we've seen at any one time in any one place is 10, and that was twice.
Yeah.
I'm overselling it because I can't guarantee you that many birds, but
Story of my life.
Even 9 birds, actually, Adam. Just don't worry about the 0. Yeah, it's a couple of comments there about just the value of the science, and no data is just as good. So it doesn't prove absence, but it doesn't prove collecting information to us where we're not seeing birds is just as important. So.